In this city, rule and order were absolute, and those who refused to follow them were either exiled or executed. Those who were exiled were then told that they needed to cross the swamps for them to reach a place called the Island of Happiness. Despite these instructions, very few people made it far since the swamps held creatures that would kill anyone who tried to cross them. In the present time, a group of prisoners are gathered around a chamber, and a man with a black sack over his head is brought to join them. All of them are taken outside, where the man with the sack is told to walk forward with his arms out. And as he begins walking, he bumps into the security barrier. The captain stops him and orders for the barrier to be removed before all of them are sent out of the city, exiled forever. Just when they step out, the guards also hand them a metal chest filled with limited supplies that they will need for their journey. He tells the prisoners that they need to get away from the city premises within an hour or they're gonna be killed. The man with the sack over his head reveals that his name is Irvin and tells the group that he'll be going on his own. He also manages to convince one of the women in the group, Christy, to join him, and as everyone begins to fight over the supplies, Irvin comes up with a different plan. With the two of them going their separate ways, Irvin asks the leader of the other group, Yest, to hand over his and Christy's share of the supplies. At first, he refuses to hand them over, but when Irvin threatens to stab Matthias, Just gives in and hands them their supplies. After this, Irvin swaps their food for the empty chest, and the two of them drag it across the swamp as the captain starts firing at them. The group notices a creature in the swamp known as Sawworth that emerges from the ground. This is when they start to realize that things may not be as easy for them. As hysteria begins to set in, a woman named Layla joins them, knowing that she might have a better chance of survival. She even tries to win her way in by telling Irvin that she's brought food along with her, but he wasn't impressed and he just sends her away. And after some time of walking, the two of them sit down to rest while Christy washes herself up. Busy washing, she doesn't notice a Sawworth behind her, but lucky for her, Irvin notices the creature and manages to grab it before it can attack Christy. He then asks Christy to cut it off and uses a dead creature as a whip. Soon, the other group, led by Just, joins them as well, but this time he asks for the case back. Even Just knows that Irvin is smart, and he must have a good reason for keeping it with him. Clearly, Irvin had been thinking ahead, and he uses the whip to keep Just and the other prisoners away. Once they manage to get away, Irvin ties a rope across Christy's waist and tells her that she needs to walk ahead of him to make sure that there are no sinkholes. When Christy expresses her displeasure at his orders, he tries to reason with her and tells her that she's lighter than him and that he can actually pull her up. He also tells her that he knows his way around the swamp, which is why the captain was trying to kill him, because he knows the way to the Island of Happiness. Meanwhile, back inside the city, the captain talks to the president and informs him that Matthias, who was an undercover prisoner sent to kill Irvin, was unsuccessful in his mission. Noticing the president's displeasure, the captain reassures him that Irvin will get killed in the swamps because they are too dangerous for anyone to make it out alive. Out in the swamps, Christy and Irvin continue their journey when Irvin sees a Sawworth emerging from the ground, and he then continues to instruct Christy to lie down on the ground without making any noises. Behind them, Just and his group, who had been following their trail, step in the middle of the ground and are suddenly attacked by the creature. Just tells everyone to lay low, but some of them start to panic, and as a result, a young prisoner is killed. Christy asks why their group has been following them, and Irvin tells her that they're trying to get to Rotten Shoal, an area where criminals and murderers were kept. That night, they eat small insects so that they don't starve to death, and Christy asks Irvin what he had done to get kicked out of the city, but he refuses to give anything away. The next morning, while Irvin was busy looking around, Christy notices a large group of creatures headed toward them. She starts running, but Irvin grabs her hand and drags her back to the empty case and they get inside. They spend their entire night inside the case until the creatures leave, and during this time, Irvin confesses that he was the advisor for the president, but he had given himself up because he felt guilty about the crimes that they were committing. Before he was exiled, he had left a virus behind that would stop all their communication and expose them. On the other hand, Just tells his group that they are going to spend the night in the middle of the swamp, but Layla cuts off her rope and rushes after Irvin and Christy, saying that she only wants to stay with them. Several others follow her, but they were caught by cannibals and killed. Hearing the screams, Christy rushes back to save them, but apparently she was too late. She begins blaming Irvin for suggesting that prisoners should be sent into the swamp, and hearing this, Irvin leaves his weapons behind and begins screaming for the cannibals to find him. Christie finally manages to calm him down and even confesses that she was offered freedom in exchange for killing the advisor, but she turned down the offer. Meanwhile, Layla and the rest of the prisoners who were hiding from the cannibals get caught by Yust. Scared, Layla ends up telling him that she was offered freedom if she was willing to carry a tracker around, which would allow the captain to launch an attack and kill him. Yust realizes that everyone will be in danger because of it and tries to cut the tracker out from her ankle, and Layla manages to break out of his hold and makes a run for it, but she's caught by a spider-like creature and gets killed. At the headquarters, the captain realizes that his asset has been killed off, which is why he takes a gun and prepares to kill the advisor himself. At the same time, the communication for all planets starts to cut off as the virus makes its way through the system. The president orders the captain to bring Irvin back alive as he's the only one with the code to undo the virus, and elsewhere, Yust catches up with Irvin and knocks him out. He takes Christie hostage as well and tells the two of them that he's going to exchange Irvin for his freedom. Back in the city, the captain sends out another man named Matthias to catch Irvin. Matthias heads to the Rotten Shoal to meet up with Yust. Meanwhile, Irvin refuses to move on his own, which is why Yust carries him all the way to Rotten Shoal. While they were being held hostage, Christie had managed to sneak a knife up Irvin's sleeve so he could free himself later. As Yust meets up with Matthias, Irvin gets to work and cuts his ties, and Yust tells Matthias that he would not hand Irvin over until he's handed a gun as well. Matthias then gives in and hands him a gun before the two of them head back to the camp where Yust had hidden Irvin. To their surprise, the advisor has escaped, and Matthias turns around and points his gun at Yust, who raises his own gun in response. But he discovers that the gun does not have any bullets, and before he can get away, Matthias shoots him in the kneecaps and chests. He then searches the building, but instead of Irvin, he finds Christie and uses her as bait to drag the advisor out of his hiding. Irvin gets one of the prisoners' job to point his gun at him and threatens Matthias to release Christie or he will die. Hearing the threats, Matthias gives in and sends Christie his way, but he doesn't get to do anything as Yust emerges from behind and stabs him in the chest. Christie, Irvin, and Job make their way out of the building and reach the ocean where Irvin figures out the floating pieces of swamp like boats and carry them toward their destination. The three of them then get on a small swamp island and reach the middle of the ocean, and this is where Job realizes that they will not make it far as the island can't carry their weight and chooses to sacrifice himself. After a few hours of floating, Christie hears a drone over them, but it sinks before it can reach them, proving that the virus had worked its way through the system and they had managed to take it down. Just then, Irvin and Christie fall from a waterfall that leads them to a military bunker. Irvin couldn't remember the entire code, but after some time, they managed to figure it out, but inside, they find a spacecraft that only had one seat. The two of them manage to squeeze inside as Christie refuses to leave Irvin behind, and they manage to squeeze.